everyone, and welcome back to the Nerdy Multiverse and yet another breakdown. Today, we will be breaking down and giving our initial thoughts on episode 8 of the third season of House of the Dragon. Of course, House of the Dragon being a prequel series to Game of Thrones that takes place during a time known as the Dance of the Dragons from the book Fire and Blood. This breakdown, and all of the other ones as well, will contain some spoilers from the source material. So this is your spoiler warning now, you have been warned. And the title for episode 8 and the finale of the third season being The Treasons at Tumbleton. Now, before we get started with the actual episode, there are two sides to this war. Team Green and Team Black. If you wish to choose your side and represent them until the very end, feel free to check out our merch that was made just for you to pick your side in this unforgettable conflict. And remember to use code DRAGON for 25% off your order. Anyways though, this episode begins with Rhaenyra being woken up and informed of Aegon and Sunfire's survival, or quote-unquote resurrection. This causes her to absolutely lose it and go to Damon to also inform him, as she continues to spiral out of control. Everything seems to be falling apart for her and her rule. The gold being gone, the small folk turning on her, the Septon refusing to anoint her, and now Aegon's resurrection, which could now be seen as a divine sign that Aegon is meant to rule and not her. But again, as usual, Damon reassures her that the gods of Westeros and the Seven have no play in their fate, as they are the blood of old Valyria, and she has an absolute power within her grasp that she only has to wield now. So they get things together and plan it out, just in case Aegon, Sunfire, and possibly even Aemond and Vhagar fly to King's Landing. They have Vermithor and Hugh guard over the dragon pit and set a watch for Sunfire. Rhaenyra then commands Daemon to continue with his mission in Tumbleton, to retake the city and root out every single Hightower from house to house, and to leave none of them standing, but also to remember to not bring any harm to the innocents. She then says that she will kill Aegon herself once Ormond and Daeron are dead themselves. Afterwards, Rhaenyra and Baela finally have a one-on-one conversation. Baela wishes for Corlys's rescue to be more important and urges Rhaenyra to act sooner rather than later. But Rhaenyra is somewhat hesitant, and that is when Baela says that it was Rhaenyra's fault, finally standing up for herself and for Rhaenyra's other supporters that she has been mistreating this entire time, including Rhaena as well. This is when Rhaenyra the Cruel truly starts to come out, as she calls Baela an insolent child, and then blames her for Sunfire still being alive. We then cut to see the Velaryon forces arriving in King's Landing, as they were ordered to come and help secure the city due to the Gold Cloaks being assassinated and their numbers reducing. Alan meets them at the shore and instructs them on what to do. They question who he even is and why he thinks that he can order them around, which is when he names himself Corlys's son and his heir in front of them. We then see Damon and his men begin to leave King's Landing and head to Tumbleton. As they do so, Hugh is also seen watching over them, and then leaving himself. Now, we know that Ulf has betrayed Rhaenyra already, but Hugh's wife, Cat, lives in Tumbleton, so he will at the very least disobey orders to ensure her safety. And speaking of Tumbleton, that is where we cut to next, as the Hightower host begin preparing for the battle. Ormond is suited up in his armor, and then he tells Daeron that in order for him to actually be king, he must be knighted first. So he ends up knighting Daeron with his Valyrian steel sword known as Vigilance, and he does so with a sort of altered version of the oath or procedure than what we are used to hearing. But once Daeron has been knighted, Ormond titles him as Sir Daeron the Daring. Again, Daeron the Daring is the nickname that Daeron also acquired in the source material. Daeron gained this title of Daeron the Daring because of him and his dragon Tessarian's role in the battles that came before Tumbleton. such as the Battle of Honeywine, which we have weirdly not seen or even heard mentioned in the show. Also in Tumbleton is Ulf the White, who is giving a little speech in the tavern about the battle to come. He makes fun of Rhaenyra and calls her the Queen of Bastards, which is pretty ironic if you think about it, because Ulf himself is a bastard. He also makes fun of the incestuous nature of the Targaryens, joking of how Daemon and Rhaenyra are lovers and are married, even though Daemon is her uncle, which is obviously and unfortunately a common theme with House Targaryen. He tries to build himself up as the one who will win this battle and defeat Daemon, as he says that Daemon will soon quake before the mighty and terrible Lord Ulf the White. Which, yeah, he does get some stuff done this episode for sure, and he does have one of the bigger dragons being Silverwing. But again, as I have said before in a previous breakdown, this is not going to end the way that he thinks it will. We then cut back to Rhaenyra as she looks over her father's mock-up of old Valyria, while holding his old crown that has now been handed down to her. She then has her handmaiden Elinda Massey summon Alan of Hull, as she requires a full escort to the Grand Sept, as she wishes to be anointed by ceremony, even if she has to force the Septon to do so, and she wishes to have it done immediately. She is very clearly desperate after hearing the news of Aegon's rise. However, she also has one more thing that she wishes to be done, and we find out that it's sending Mysaria away to Pentos and casting her out of her council and out of her service, which obviously comes as a shock to Mysaria and may be another decision that will eventually backfire in Rhaenyra's face. We then see Helena outside crying, as she is told that it is time to return to her chambers, as the hour has passed. So it seems that she is only given an hour outside of her chambers, and yet she is still alone during that time as well. But anyways, as she is being escorted back inside, she sees the horse and the wagon that she saw in her vision from the very last episode. She then runs into Mysaria, who is being escorted out of the castle. And as she is, she tells Helena that her and her unborn child are prisoners, and that Rhaenyra will never set them free. She also informs Helena of Aegon's survival. We then cut to Harrenhal as Aemond has nightmares of Rook's Rest, and him burning his own brother and his dragon Sunfire, as we can hear him reliving the moments in his head. After saving his life from the poison that Alicent gave him in the last episode, Alice then begins to tell Aemond a story of Harren the Black and Aegon the Conqueror, about when Aegon and Balerion burnt Harrenhal, and how it was to end Harren's line. But she says that it was not so easily ended, and that a child survived, but was wounded beyond repair. So his mother turned to ancient powers and dark arts to try and heal his wounds, but ultimately to no avail. And once he was gone, she tried to go with him, which is when she discovered that she was cursed to live on, and her name, her title, and her castle would all be stripped away from her. So clearly Alice is referring to herself here, even though this all was over 100 years ago, which makes her much like Melisandre from the original series. But also, this entire lore drop and situation is entirely new to the story, and Alice being the mother to one of Harren the Black's children was never confirmed or even mentioned in the source material. So I'm curious to see what people think about this. We then cut back to Rhaenyra as she goes to meet with Helena, who has still refused to eat any food. Obviously, after being separated from her daughter Jacaerys and her mother Alicent leaving her, and after what Mysaria told her, Helena is just completely over all of this. She tells Rhaenyra that their father Viserys would hate her for this. Rhaenyra then says that he did nothing to prevent it, and she tried to live by his philosophy, but it was bound to fail. Helena tries to tell Rhaenyra about a beetle that emerges during the summer, but only in King's Landing, and one that dons many colors and sustains itself on the waste of other creatures, but one that is still beautiful. Rhaenyra says that when summer returns, she would love for Helena to show her this beetle, clearly just dismissing everything that was said. So Helena calls her out and says that she doesn't care about it, and everything that Rhaenyra cares about is ugly, even calling Rhaenyra herself ugly. This causes Rhaenyra to just get up and walk out of the room as she orders her men to force feed Helena food. Another sort of display of Rhaenyra turning into Rhaenyra the Cruel. Just outside of the Red Keep, Alan prepares the soldiers for the escort to the Grand Sept. Adam then comes out to meet with his brother and informs him that Rhaenyra has now confined Baela to the Red Keep, and says that the path that she is on is a dark one. Alan does seem to be blindly following Rhaenyra right now, even though he says that he has no ambitions and he only wishes to fulfill his duty. Now, Adam may be doubting Rhaenyra right now, but he will remain loyal to her, as long as they stay close to the source material, that is. And if they do so, he will have some pretty legendary moments in the next season that prove his loyalty. Anyways though, after their meeting and with the escort fully prepared, Rhaenyra walks out of the Red Keep rocking a full suit of armor with the crown on her head. Her son and her heir, Joffrey, is also with her, and he too has a little circlet on his head. This leads into them heading towards the Sept inside of a carriage and protected by a full escort of soldiers. So clearly Rhaenyra's decisions have also led to her distrusting the small folk. As they make their way there, Rhaenyra sees more graffiti on the walls, with the same saying as the others from beforehand, reading the Queen of Bastards. She then finally speaks to Joffrey here and goes on to tell him about the prophecy that her father told her that was passed down from Aegon the Conqueror himself, of course being the Song of Ice and Fire. On their way to the Sept, the streets seemingly grow rather crowded, which causes Mysaria's own escort out of the city to get distracted, allowing her to escape. Cutting back to Tumbleton as the forces mixed up of Rivermen and the Winter Wolves arrive just outside of the town. Daemon and Gwaine observe their forces over the walls, and Daemon wonders how they will face them all, in which Gwaine says that they will do so bravely and pointlessly, again displaying their distrust and disdain with Aemond and his plans to face a force much larger than their own. We then see more of Aemond's plans come to light, as he orders literal children from the town to be placed in front of the walls, serving as soldiers but also as shields, and a way to test the length that Team Black will go to retake the town. Roxton also reports to Aemond that Ulf the White has not reported, and he is not with his dragon Silverwing either. So they order men to search the entire town for him, as Ulf and his dragon's betrayal is their piece on the board that they are heavily relying on. Daemon realizes that something isn't right, and that Aemond and Roxton have made plans and not told Daemon about them. Daemon also refuses to allow their men and the innocent people of the town die for nothing, and says that he will take wing against the enemy himself. But Gwaine advises him to not do so, as he will die as well. But as Caraxes and Daemon arrive, Gwaine comes up with a brand new plan. We can also see the massive army cheering once Daemon arrives on his dragon, once again displaying the many houses that make up this massive force, such as House Tully, House Mallister, House Blackwood, House Bracken, House Piper, and many more. Gwaine's new plan is releasing Corlys Velaryon and handing him over to Daemon, and to propose peace in name of Daemon. After him and Daemon free Corlys, Gwaine takes him straight to Daemon and his forces. He brings forth the idea that Rhaenyra can still sit the Iron Throne and rule over the Crown Lands, Riverlands, and Daemon can rule over Old Town, separating the realm as they used to be before Aegon the Conqueror's time. Corlys interrupts and changes those plans and says to just allow Daemon to rule as Warden of the South, and he also suggests wedding Daemon to Rhaenyra to seal a breach between their houses. Rhaenyra was, of course, previously betrothed to Jacaerys before his death, and in the source material, she later would be married to Corwin Corbray, and then later on taking a second husband, Aemond Hightower. But obviously Daemon wants no part of this and only wishes to see Rhaenyra rule over the entirety of the Seven Kingdoms. So he takes Corlys as his own prisoner and nearly chokes out Gwaine before sending him running back to Tumbleton. Peace is off the table completely and bloodshed is all that will follow now. Daemon foresees a new Valyria rising and the Hightowers being completely erased. We then cut back to Harrenhal as Aemond wakes up to hearing the sound of a dragon flying around the old castle, as Aegon and Sunfire have arrived to confront Aemond. But clearly after all of the visions and the nightmares that he has had, Aemond doesn't care to fight his brother anymore. Instead, he just kneels and begs for his forgiveness, which also puts Aegon off on wanting to kill his brother as well. After informing Aemond and Alicent that Daemon has been declared the rightful king in their absence, he says that they will go and find Vhagar and then fly to Tumbleton together and put Daemon and Ormond in check. Afterwards, they will then march on King's Landing under Aegon's banners, and once that has been done, and once he has returned to the Iron Throne, he will then, maybe, forgive his brother. Now, being primarily a Team Black supporter, I will admit that I have been enjoying all of these different Aegon scenes, especially within these last 2 episodes. But with this whole rivalry between all of the different Targaryen brothers on Team Green, it is all show original, as was Aemond burning Aegon on purpose in Season 2. And to see them finally come together and not trying to kill each other is a bit relieving. Anyways though, we then cut back to just outside of Tumbleton, as Daemon and the other lords of the army plan out their attack on the town. Daemon does say that they must take caution and not bring any harm to the civilians or the innocent people of the town, as the realm is watching, and the queen's image must not be harmed any further. Obviously, this entire plan will become much more difficult now, as they are told that Ormond has fortified the walls with children. But Daemon orders Roderick and his Greybeards to go over the walls and open the gates from within, hopefully granting their wish of death, but only after they open the gates, that is. Of course, the Greybeards' entire purpose in this war is to die for the cause. That is why they were sent. None of them are expecting to come back alive, and most of, if not all of them, don't want to. They want to die in battle. And that of course relays with their leader, Roderick Dustin, aka Roddy the Ruin, who says he can't wait to die for the queen. During this meeting, we can see a member of yet another house from the Riverlands. This is a soldier from House Goodbrook. Also during this meeting, Daemon mentions that of Sir Geribald, who we can also see behind Black Alley. Sir Geribald is a knight from House Grey, of course, and in the source material, he was one of the men that Criston Cole demanded a duel with before being shot down by arrows during the Battle of Butcher's Ball. So it is good to see he does at least have an appearance here, despite being cut from Butcher's Ball. We then cut back to King's Landing as Rhaenyra and her forces have arrived at the Grand Sept. She confronts Septon Eustace and demands that he anoints her here and now. But he refuses, and he clearly isn't a fan of her either, as he says that the resurrection of Aegon and his dragon are a clear sign that the gods have chosen the rightful ruler, even referring to Rhaenyra as princess rather than queen. He keeps his faith in his seven-faced god and refuses to oppose their will, even if Rhaenyra has the strength of 6 dragons at her side. So she names him a traitor and orders Alan to kill him in the very walls of the Sept itself. The Septon says that harming him is to declare war on the Starry Sept and to damn themselves to the deepest of the 7 hells. This leads to Alan hesitating initially, but then Rhaenyra reminds him that he is the blood of old Valyria itself, and he answers to higher gods than him. So after hearing this, Alan goes through with it and kills him. This entire situation not only reminds me of Cersei's conflict with the Faith in the original series, but it also reminds me of the conflict between the Faith and Maegor the Cruel from the books, which led to the very first trial by 7. Now, killing off the High Septon will definitely have its consequences, but also, this is Septon Eustace, who actually is one of the narrators from the source material, who retells many of the stories of this time. So to see them kill someone like that off in the show is rather interesting. This leads to Rhaenyra walking out to greet the massive crowd that has now gathered around the Sept, as she recalls the time that her father named her as his heir, and that it was not done in secret, but in ceremony, and that hundreds of lords traveled hundreds of miles just to swear fealty to her, which we all saw ourselves in the very first season. This also recalls how the Hightowers said that Viserys changed his mind and named Aegon his actual heir, which was done in secret and not in ceremony. She then says that her rule has been prophesized, even before her own father was born, as she then decides to tell the entirety of the crowd of the prophecy that her father told her, that was passed down from Jacaerys and Aegon the Conqueror before him, strangely telling them all about the rather secret prophecy of a song of ice and fire, mentioning an ancient enemy from the far north that resides past the wall, obviously referring to the White Walkers. She says that only the power of dragons will be able to stand against it, which, well, we know isn't entirely true because of the original series, and how the Night King was actually just killed by Arya Stark. And then she says that she is the prince that was promised herself, but she also decides to say this in High Valyrian, so the crowd won't even understand what she is saying. But we also know that this statement is false, whether it's from the shows or the source material. Rhaenyra is not the prince that was promised. It is very well known and debated that the prince that was promised is either Jon Snow or Daenerys Targaryen. Either way though, it is not Rhaenyra. It is one of the other two. During her speech, she says that she must light the way, using the Hightower house words to try and gain the loyalty of the small folk, as she also resorts to this sort of fear-mongering tactic. Mysaria also manages to make it among the crowd and watch this speech. We then return to Tumbleton as the battle begins. The Winter Wolves begin charging the walls with their one goal being opening the gates and then dying for their queen. All while this is happening, Ormond and Roxton continue their search for Ulf, and Gwaine searches for Darren. Once the Winter Wolves make their way over the gates, they begin cutting down a ton of Hightower soldiers and taking over the streets of the town. And then Oscar Tully and Black Aly lead the cavalry to flank the castle, as we get a quick shot of Aly displaying her skill in archery. The gates having to be opened seems to be taking too long, so Damon calls for Caraxes, and they decide to burn it down. Once again, Ormond uses the children as a shield, and Daemon gives them a chance to run, and most of them do, but then he is forced to burn the ones that stayed. Now, with the gates open, the Winter Wolves only have one more thing to do: and that is to die. So Roderick orders his men to search for Daemon, and he decides to go after Aemond himself. And that is who we see next, as him and his men finally find Ulf passed out after drinking at the tavern. Aemond then beats Ulf in the middle of the street and orders him to get on his dragon and do as he was told, mirroring exactly what Daemon did to Ulf, which was one of the reasons Ulf switched sides to begin with. So exactly as I have said before in my previous breakdown, this alliance for Ulf is not going how he thought it was going to go. Anyways though, he returns to Silverwing, who has been resting by Vermithor this entire time, as Hugh has also disobeyed orders and decided to join the fight to find his wife, albeit he has not betrayed anyone like Ulf has. And as chaos erupts within the walls of Tumbleton, Daemon cuts down every single soldier that comes to face him, as he searches for Aemond himself. But that is when he comes face to face with Jon Roxton the Bold. Roxton calls him a babe killer, calling back to Blood and Cheese, and how he paid 2 men to kill Aemond, and how they instead killed Helena and Aegon's child, Jacaerys. The two then begin to duel. And wow, was this really cool. These two never fought in the source material, but I really loved this fight. Not only did it showcase Roxton's skill and strength, but it does prove that Daemon is not the best of his era, as many do believe. Daemon gets absolutely manhandled and beaten up in this fight, and you could even say that he was very close to being killed by Jon here, and was only saved by the debris that separated them. Now, during this fight, we of course get to finally see Roxton in action and using his sword, which is actually a Valyrian steel sword itself, known as Orphan Maker. Anyways though, as all of this is happening, Gwaine finally finds Daemon, who is unchaining Targaryen, as he plans to ride out and fight himself. Once again, we can see just how protective Targaryen is over Daemon. And I do wonder if this is caused by Ormond's possible abuse. Gwaine tries to plead with Daemon to not go out and die for nothing, but Daemon refuses to be known as a coward and a craven. But neither has to happen now, as they are signaled by Targaryen that something else has happened, as they go outside and see exactly what Ormond's secret plan was, as Ulf then takes to the skies on Silverwing. Team Black's army cheers, thinking another one of their allies has joined the battle, only for Ulf to turn the dragon around and start burning their forces. Ormond's plan finally coming to fruition, he too joins the battle, only to be hunted down by Roddy the Ruin, where the two get in a pretty intense battle where Roderick not only gets stabbed, but also loses an arm. However, this doesn't stop him or his fighting spirit, as afterwards he beats Aemond up and then stabs him to near death, as Ulf turns Silverwing towards the town and towards them. He then burns them both, killing them. So now, not only has he betrayed Team Black, but he has now also betrayed Team Green as well. Both Roderick and Aemond die in a somewhat similar manner in the source material, albeit there was no dragons involved with their deaths. As in the book, Roddy the Ruin actually kills both Aemond Hightower and Brynden Hightower during the Battle of Tumbleton. Despite losing his shield arm to Brynden, he would cut both of the Hightowers down and then succumb to his own injuries. Daemon finally wakes back up to see the carnage that has taken place in Tumbleton, in shots that are very reminiscent to when Daenerys burnt King's Landing in the original series. Innocent people, including children, are burned, houses are turned to ash, and everyone is in peril. Daemon still doesn't realize that they have been betrayed, and continues to march forward despite his injuries, before Corlys stops him and informs him that Ulf has turned on them and that the city is lost, and that they must leave now. Gwaine then wakes up himself and calls out to Daeron, who we do not see the fate of in this episode, as Jon Roxton then discovers Ormond killed and burnt by the Dragonfire. And then Hugh finally finds his wife Cat, who has also been killed in the battle. Just devastating losses all around. We then see Ulf and Silverwing flying away, as Caraxes chases after them. But if you go after Silverwing, Vermithor will follow, as those two are mates. Now, with the first Battle of Tumbleton finished, yes, there will be a second one, if they go along with the source material, of course. But this one was also done a bit differently than it was in the book, as the first Battle of Tumbleton was actually Team Black defending the town from Ormond and his forces. And that is when Rhaenyra decided to send Ulf and Hugh on their dragons to help defend the town, which is ultimately where the betrayal happened. Ulf still betrays Rhaenyra in the book, as he does here, but he does not betray Team Green in the book. And also in the book, Hugh also betrays Rhaenyra. So I'm curious to see where they go with him in the next season. Another difference is Damon actually being here to begin with, as Damon was not actually present for either of the battles of Tumbleton, and neither was his dragon Caraxes. Although I will admit, I did not mind his inclusion at all. We then cut to Helena as she seemingly finishes her cross-stitch tapestry, and then randomly gets up and begins to walk towards her window. As Rhaenyra returns from the sept, her handmaiden rushes in and informs her of something, as we then see Rhaenyra walk into Helena's room, where Helena is nowhere to be found. With the window wide open and her tapestry laid out in front of it, it is made clear that she has pulled off a Joffrey, if you get what I mean. As Alicent witnesses a massive group of butterflies take off, something that has been connected to Helena for a very long time now, symbolizing that she has died. As we then see Helena herself in the aftermath of her jumping from the Red Keep and landing in these spikes below. She does seemingly do this in the show because of the feeling of being a prisoner and being left alone. And I was mistaken, they never actually brought Maelor into the picture. But in the source material, Helena does indeed die in the same exact way, by jumping from the Red Keep and into some spikes. She does this because she is grief-stricken and broken by the brutal murder of her youngest son, Maelor Targaryen, who she was likely still pregnant with in the show. Anyways though, after discovering what has happened, Rhaenyra then decides to look at the tapestry that Helena created. The first image depicts her very own death, as she falls from the Red Keep with tears in her eyes and donning a green dress for the very first time in a very long time, symbolizing her connection to Team Green and the Hightowers. And it even seems that her shape in the tapestry symbolizes that of a butterfly. Rhaenyra then continues to look over the tapestry as the next image depicts her on the Iron Throne, with dragons and hands behind, all engulfed in flame, and red covering Rhaenyra's body, presumably being blood from cuts that the throne give to her. This is massive foreshadowing, and even then, I still don't really want to reveal what it fully and truly means, but it is a very big hint to where Rhaenyra's story goes, that's for sure. Book readers will already know. After looking over the tapestry and discovering that Helena has taken her own life, Rhaenyra decides to just close the window, and that is where this episode and the third season of House of the Dragon ends off. Overall, I am actually quite surprised by how well they executed this finale. I will be honest, I was pretty worried that it would feel rushed in some ways because of the other sort of filler arcs that kept dragging on and how that might have affected the big event being the Battle of Tumbleton, but I can proudly say that that did not happen, and I am pleasantly surprised. I definitely had my issues and nitpicks with this season and each of the episodes, but it was way better than the second season of the show, that's for sure. I thought that this was a good finale and they did well with what they had laid out. Of course, it had its issues here and there though. Ormond was a great antagonist while he lasted, and I loved Roddy the Ruin, even though we didn't get as much as I wanted out of him. One thing I think that this episode did really well was display the brutal nature of both sides in the war, and there wasn't a clear bias towards either side. There was also absolutely incredible action in this one that led me to want even more. But this episode also comes with the usual great performances and music scores as well. I really hope that they can successfully tell the rest of the story with the last season, which will presumably be another 8 episodes. But with this one, it was another good watch. And if I had to rate the episode, I think I would give it an 8 out of 10. I might end up doing a full season review shortly, as my other videos are all just mainly breakdowns, but be sure to keep an eye out for my season 4 predictions and expectations video. But yeah, that about does it for this episode, from me at least. But of course, I would like to hear your thoughts on the episode and the season as a whole as well, so make sure to leave them down below. With that being said, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed our breakdown and review on this episode, don't forget to give it a like. And with that, we will see you all the next time that we go through and explore the Nerdy Multiverse.